G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talk Stuff. Now, I may only have your attention for 5 minutes, but please, that's even if you clicked on this. MGTOW, please understand, there is a very good reason why MGTOW needs to understand why it's important to support the people of Iran, even though it is the world's first female feminist revolution, not uprising, to be precise. It is, however, it is no longer a predominantly feminist revolution. So understand, it is evolving. The female revolution only opened the gates from 2022 to 2025. 2026 is a freedom revolution, and I'll get into that. But what's happening in Iran today? First off, right, Iran is having a significant domestic crisis. This is a bigger uprising since this is bigger than the 58, all the way through to 60s, 70s. There is nothing, right? The 1979 revolution is the only thing bigger than this, right, in modern history of Iran. Despite nationwide crackdowns, the anti-government protests continue, right? Main casualties, of course, are human rights protesters. 500 to 600 have been killed. The various reports actually claim the number is much higher than this because of the deaths in detention that do not go reported. So there are detainees and suspects in the thousands. Now, this was triggered by a combination of events since 2022. First was the death of a woman in custody, followed by massive crackdowns on women rejecting the hijab, the falling into attendance of Islamic churches, synagogue, mosques, and of course the economic crisis. Though the economic crisis was initially triggered in 2025, as the conflicts with other nations got hot, the damage to the Iranian economy was big, particularly with the covert exports falling rapidly, particularly oil. Iran, to deal with its power problems and its water crisis, had to significantly raise taxes, raise revenue. They have been unable to borrow money. They've been unable to come to a deal with the United States. Russia has been unable to bail them out. And China does not seem to care about their debts other than collecting on them at any price. China is threatening to occupy Iran to secure its debts under Belt and Road Initiative. So there is a lot to unpack here. And Iran has collapsed under soaring inflation, record unemployment, and price, particularly of food, rising 70% in the last few months. Now, of course, there's also the rising opposition. Now, in Iran, opposition groups are controlled. They are juggled, but they are managed and controlled by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Now, international relations, of course, as you know, you have poor relations with America, you are most likely to do poor unless you are a slave state like China or a massively corrupt state like India. Now, Trump's tariffs hit them hard. 25% for dealing in Russian oil and supporting the Ukraine war. Bang! That, however, does not account for the rest of the price rises. Military threats. Just right now, the United States has stated it is no longer afraid to use military force against Iran, which means the whatever Chinese presence in Iran is either diminished or retreated back to Azerbaijan, which is Russian-controlled. Tehran's with defiance. Everybody's defiant until they have Marines on the shore. Now, whether or not Iran actually gets to that point, we do not know yet. But trust me when I say Iran is shaking in their boots. This is the this isn't Persian, right? I told her I ain't a Persian, he's an Iranian by birth, but he's an Arab by descent. So his pride, cultural pride, racial pride, and of course religious pride are all intersecting into the personal ego, right, that he believes that he's God's gift to Iran, and that Iran is his to fuck with. And Iran is saying no more, right? No more to the Arab occupation, no more to the suppression of Persia, no more to the... Iranians love you, okay? Please stop hating on Iranians. Iranian people love you. It is the Arabs. Please start to learn the difference. Diplomatic. Despite the rhetoric, there is actually diplomacy going on. But of course, there is nothing that can shake the... and remember, while people say this is Putin, that Putin is the sneaky, but the real power in BRICS is China, India. Their economies are much larger than Russia's. Their combined armies could crush Russia if it wasn't for nuclear weapons. Please understand, the enemy of my enemy means you should be embracing Russia, not India, not China. But Russia doesn't have the manpower to provide you with cheap labor, so your imperialist overlords, I mean your betters from the industrial hubs of Europe, the deserts of Saudi Arabia, the synagogues of Israel, the gold and diamond mines of Africa. Your banking overlords want you to care about cheap labour in India, not your genetic brothers in Russia. And that's where MGTOW really needs to start paying attention, because the Caucasus also didn't just give birth to the Caucasian races, of which Persia is a Caucasian race. Don't get me wrong, right? They may not look it, but they are our brothers. The Arabs same. The Arabs got swept over and overrun by the Turkmens, who sit today in occupied Turkey, right? They are the Mongol remains of the Mongol Empire. They obliterated the. But as you see, more and more the people of Persia, the further they get away from their Mongol roots, the more they're returning back to their brothers. Now, despite the public rhetoric, right, the feminist revolution of women, life, freedom, the WLF movement. Now, feminist groups everywhere, particularly on Reddit, claim, we support you, sisters. No, they don't. The sisterhood of the world is siding with the Ukrainians, with the 4B movement. The only thing they are not, particularly in Europe, they're saying nothing about Islam. Now, for the Women, Life, Freedom movement erupted in late 2022 as a group of scholars and activists. You may think, yes, this is a left-wing revolution, this is a feminist revolution. That's over, right? The freedom movement, the Iranian freedom movement under the prince has taken over, and you've seen how the crowd swelled from a few. Once the prince got involved, the crowd swelled from a few hundred, right? The WLF movement is still involved, but now the predominant protesters are now young men. So this is brotherhood rising. But the feminist revolution, right? The centrality of women, it did start around the death of Bashar Amani in custody of the morality police, which is another reason why we don't need and want Islam in the West, right? It should be banned. It is not a religion. It is a politic. It's a barracks cult of imperialism, right? It's to create a mindset of obedience to the cult, and in turn, the cult will expand and grow. That is imperialism, right? Foreign occupation, where we have Pakistanis in Britain claiming to be British, but they come from a country where they kick the British out and tell you that you're not welcome in Pakistan, but they're welcome in Britain because migration is a human right for them. Remember, they consider it a human right, and they consider you to be subhuman. Intersectionality and the Kurdish movement did kick off ethnic rights and economic justice because of the oppression of minorities in Iran. But, however, in 2026, though, the movement continues and the revolution against the Islamic Republic continues, independent research has shown that the majority of protests are now men. From 2024 to 2026, the number of protests by men and the number of unemployed, because as unemployed men swell, the only way now forward for men is to, you can be a rugged individual, yet be part of a group or a movement. But it has become religious rejection. And senior Islamic cleric has been forced, that since late 2024, they've had to close 50,000 mosques. They're only a country that had 75,000 mosques. That's 2/3. This is not economic, right? They poured half their economy into Islam and still do, but it's failing. The mosques are clean, swept, although thousands of them have been burnt down. 34 in the last couple of days, but this is probably going to only increase. Independent organisations have verified that despite the Islamic claim that they are 99% of the population of the Middle East, only 32% identify as a Muslim. That's the minority. The minority of Muslims, not the minority of Muslims in Iran. The minority of Muslims worldwide identify as Muslim, predominantly in the West. So there's a growing number of alternative faiths. The reports from 2025 highlight that this is now a Jesus revolution, where over 1 million Iranians, this is twice the number of women twice the number of women identify as Christian than feminist in Iran. More Iranians identify as Christians than Muslim. They've gone from 25% to 33%. That is identifying. Higher than identifying as Muslim in average. So big cities, big towns, you're going to get lots of Muslims, but most of the rest of the population, out of Iran's top cities, most of their so-called cities, of the 260 cities, some of them do not qualify as a city. Right? That's the arrogance of the regime. But Christianity is the growing alternative faith. Now, people say, what about Sectarianism? Yeah, I do believe it's number 2 right now. It was number 3. But atheism has fallen from number 1 to number 5. There's also Bahani and other Islamic sects, but most are not joining Islam. They're joining Christian, predominantly the Orthodox, but there are lots of Catholics. So nearly half of Iranians surveyed are against the Iranian regime. And surveys usually are, I would say there are some polls, right? Any poll by any Harvard or group, whatever, but these are the international pollsters who do the polling for big government institutions. These right. The margins of error are much smaller, and the driving forces, of course, is to make sure shifts in investment, government policy. They cannot afford to make mistakes. They make a mistake, they'd lose their contracts. Okay. Now, driving change in Iran, of course, is rigid theocracy, right? People, for a long time, Iranian people have been groomed culturally, linguistically, you name it, everything is Arab, right? Persia all but ceased to exist. The brief period of Western Enlightenment gave Iranians a taste of freedom, and they loved it. They loved America, they loved American food, they loved American fashion, they loved American television. But unfortunately, a third of the country did not. Sorry, 2/3 of the country did not. The Arab academics and the Muslims. The Muslims and the liberals destroyed Iran, and then the Muslims wiped out the liberal establishment. Most of the Ayatollah's rigid theocracy does not come from anywhere but Islam. It is Islamic. It is pure Islam. It is as Islamic as you can get. Compulsory laws, compulsory punishments, absolutism, and absolute violence. Young Iranians, right, with increasingly the cultural shift away, right? The revolution means nothing to them. The propaganda means nothing to them. All the claims about the Shah, they look at the statistics, they look at the videos online, and they see a better Iran than the ruins they live in today. Technically, Iran, most of Iran, is in decay and has been for over 2 decades. So why should MGTOW care? It's a matter of perspective, right? Men going their own way, sure. But you can't go your own way under Islam. You can't go in your way when the state hammers every nail. Now, why haven't they hammered every nail now? Because men refused, right? Young men, who the revolution means nothing to, did not oppress women. They said, we're going our own way. Women don't want to marry us. That's, increasing state oppression was predominantly focused on women. They forgot about oppressing the men. They thought if we give all these men this freedom, they'll love, they'll embrace. If you can be as violent as you want, you'll embrace Islam. But unfortunately, it just turned Iran into a violent society. Now, passivity on the surface, right? The semblance of normality and civilization. But behind the scenes, you have a culture of backstabbing, raping, pillaging, and oppression. So the Farsi, and particularly with the problems with America, technically, when America invaded Iraq, millions of Iranians who were living under the Iraqi regime went back to Iran, said, hey, but they also brought with them a lot of Farsi refugees, particularly. So Iran's numbers swelled. Iran started to destabilize. So they tried to exert influence over Iraq. But increasingly, Iraq has been rejecting and expelling all the pro-Iranians. So this brought a lot of Farsi manosphere people who have been MGTOW. So this is becoming a MGTOW revolution. Hence why I asked, is this now a feminist revolution or a MGTOW revolution? It was a feminist revolution, now it's a MGTOW revolution, where men lead and women follow, right? The feminists are suddenly going, no hijab, but, and they're now following the men, and the men are bringing the regime to their knees. Because the regime can't call on the police, they can't call on the army, and they can't call on the Revolutionary Guard. Their leadership is in tatters. Most of the young men don't follow Islam anymore, so there's no cultural obedience. The decades of brainwashing, you imagine decades of brainwashing to suddenly wear off because you millions of young men who, though Iranian, came from Iraq, having tasted Operation Iraqi Freedom, they thought, the Americans so oppressive. Oh, the Americans so bad. Then they get to Iran thinking, hey, we can be free. Oh, no. we're being oppressed because we're Farsi. So fuck you, we're not joining you. So all these unemployed young men who were going their own way have decided, international brotherhood, baby. And though many are critical of the Western ideal of the manosphere, many are embracing the more humanistic qualities of MGTOW, right? That at the core philosophy of MGTOW is a non-violent, detached from systems that oppress men, which absolutely appeals to the Iranian male. And now, right, specifically gender dynamics, right? The MGTOW philosophy and the gender dynamics with the feminist movement being highly influenced by radicals, right? But the men, because they're standing up, taking lead, women just go, poof, I'm lesbian until graduation, you know, and I'm going to respect. They dress respectfully, but not right. They don't embrace the feminist revolution like the British sow cow did. Sour cow, lol cow, whatever, right? The green eggs and ham from Central England, you know, the rotten spoilt children of the boomer period, right? The rotten spoilt brats who grew up in luxury and now just lash out because you won't give them their free healthcare because they're full of STDs, drugs, alcohol, and a burnt out canyon clip. But this is not so in Iran. We have a young revolution which has gone from feminist to MGTOW. It's amazing. But, of course, the BBC and all the other organisations will still have you believe it is a feminist revolution. Don't worry, brothers. If you can spread the message, spread the word, right? No Democrat regime. Democrat cities, you know, you're going to have young men coming to red states. You are going to swell your numbers. MGTOW, if MGTOW stands strong and actually as a welcoming brotherhood, right? No central committees, no oppression of men, no Zionism, no Islamism, no feminism. You watch the feminists, right? They'll who cares if they go to Canada, right? Good riddance to bad rubbish. Half of Canada's going to join the United States soon, hopefully. And Greenland, if I was in Greenland, I'd say to Trump, $250. I want my mortgages. I want all my debts. I want make sure not one. You know, as soon as we want everything, right? The full citizenship, the whole shebang. You know, citizenship, all our driver's licenses, all our money transferred over. You know, all the guarantees, freedom of movement. You know, Greenland. Who cares? Come Prime Minister, yeah, your governor will guarantee you a transition period. So he'll have 2 terms, you know, to transition or whatever. And they're probably holding out for $250. Heck, I would absolutely say, hey, Trump, you want to buy Australia? I'm ready, man. I am ready. So thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. You can support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Brothers, stand strong. I'll see you in the next video, and bye for now.